Howdy, y'all. Some of y'all might have been waiting like 24 hours. Did y'all see me on the itinerary yesterday at like 2:30? What a bunch of fans. Thanks for hanging around. All right, so Clay called me last week and wanted to know what I wanted to talk about, and if you followed me at all, there's a whole lot of topics I like to talk about. I've been ignited with a fury to try to expose all the lies you've been told by the medical profession, American medical complex, pharmaceuticals, that I've been aware of for 20 years. So I started spitting off all these things I wanted to say, and Clay's like, can you just do the remdesivir thing? Everybody loved it, and I said, sure, I can do that. And I'm gonna go through it here in the next 15 minutes, but I want you to know why I really wanna do it. There is this guy that texts me every morning at like 5:45, 6 in the morning, and he says this, Dr. Artis, your message is too important. Keep your computer burning. It stay in the media. Don't stop. Keep it on fire. Do you want to know who this guy is? It's Dr. Peter McCullough. So every day I do it. And he just keeps on throwing articles at me, research at me, because he knows early treatment is the best option. And he knows that the hospital protocols were set up to create the false illusion that there was a virus out there killing a bunch of Americans, and behind closed doors they were going to criminally, medically kidnap you and your loved ones and inject you with the drug that was going to cause acute kidney failure, liver failure, that was going to cause a majority of people treated to die. And then Anthony Fauci could go on the news and tell all of you Americans that the virus was killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. Now we're going to get into this. But if you've ever studied or watched documentaries or watched Dateline or watched Criminal Minds, they always say there's profiles for murderers. They always do the same thing. Anthony Fauci's been doing the same thing for 40 years. He tried to convince the entire world that there was an HIV virus causing AIDS and making people die. Anthony Fauci sold the world on an idea that there was a drug to fix the virus you couldn't see physically called AZT, and he was going to give it to millions of people around the world who had HIV. The side effects of AZT killed 11 million people around the world from the side effects of the drugs, and they called the side effects of AIDS the side effects of AZT to convince you they were dying of AIDS. That's been over the last 40 years. He did the same thing this time. There's this virus that they created genetically, engineered in labs around the world. Only they couldn't make it deadly enough to kill this God's greatest creation. And when it started to fail, they wanted it to kill a whole lot more people than it did. But when they realized from November of 2019 to April of 2020, when they realized less than 1% of people were dying, Anthony Fauci went into action. He already had this planned. He knew he could come up with a drug to make it look like the virus was killing a whole lot of people, so he could sell you on the idea that the virus was deadly, that they were treating in the hospitals, when in fact it was remdesivir poisoning from the beginning. All right, so here we go. Peter McCullough, Clay Clark, this is for you. Here we go. All right, so you're going to want this, just so you know. I didn't anticipate doing this. I retired 3 years ago. No, I did not expect to be in this spot, but I cannot stand people physically being lied to and then murdered. I'm not okay with that. So it has morphed into this, let me make the whole world aware of this criminal protocol from May 2020 is when I first discovered this protocol by Anthony Fauci. It was now the world is demanding a resource they can trust. Yeah, I'll be that for you, because I'm not okay with people dying. If you do not scan this code, just take a picture, because at some point in your life, you're going to want it, and you're going to want to set up a username and password on my site. Why? Because once you sign in with a username and password, I don't care if you just do it once, and then sign into my website, there's going to be a new resources tab that appears that's not there before you set up a username and password. Click the resources page, scroll down to the bottom, and there are 2 forms every American needs, created by an attorney named Kelly Sorrell, and I asked her permission to do this. Everyone needs these 2 forms at the very bottom of my site on the resources page. It is a medical directive, an advanced directive to physicians if they're going to treat you in hospitals for COVID-19. You sign it, initial it, get it notarized, and you need it ready as if you're pregnant in your 3rd trimester and this is your travel bag ready to go. You need these forms printed, go get them, and then delete my website if you want to. You need the directive to physicians form for COVID-19 treatment, and you also need the medical power of attorney form that's right underneath it. Print them both, sign them, initial them. The very first bullet point on page 1 of the medical directive, it says, under no circumstances, if you diagnose me positive for COVID-19 with a PCR test or you just think I have it, I do not consent to remdesivir treatment or venting me under any circumstances. You need to know the hospitals are set up as prisons to imprison you and then poison you, torture you, and kill you. There there is in a lot of hospitals around the country, we're seeing this reported to us, that in the admissions intake forms, they actually have it hidden in there that by signing that form, you consent to having that institution give you the COVID-19 vaccines, and you didn't read it. So the fourth point on the directive to physicians for all hospitals for COVID-19 treatment, you might as well just have this for anything. You don't think you're going to walk into a hospital with a stub toe and they're going to shove a PCR swab up your nose just to get the diagnosis? They are. You're going to want these two forms there for you. The fourth point on that front page, under no circumstances, if I'm admitted to this hospital or you send me to a psychiatric facility, I never consent to the COVID-19 vaccines. Initial it, get it notarized. If anyone gives you remdesivir, vents you, or does anything against the 5 things you signed off on there, you have every legal recourse to imprison anyone who injects you with those shots, anybody who puts you on remdesivir, and I would hold them accountable. That's some of the resources that are on there. All right, we'll start the presentation. Let's go. If you didn't get a picture. All right, here we go. So what did I know? This is actually a study. In May of 2020, Anthony Fauci said there was a study done with Ebola where remdesivir was proven safe and effective against the Ebola virus. Therefore, we're going to use it in this novel coronavirus. Ebola virus trial, coronavirus pandemic, okay? This Ebola trial is so significant. I just happen to be one of the few people to look at this in May 2020, I think, in the whole world. The Ebola trial is really the rehearsal dinner, I call it, for Anthony Fauci's COVID wedding. Inside of this study, there was 4 experimental drugs, remdesivir, but Anthony Fauci said in May 2020, all Americans, we're going to use this one proven safe and effective drug against the Ebola virus, against the coronavirus. Well, what did they find in this study? Next slide. This is actually the mortality report, and you'll see up here that halfway through the study, they found that there was 2 of the 4 experimental drugs that had the highest mortality rate. Remdesivir had the highest. ZMapp was number 2, which was a triple monoclonal antibody, by the way. This one killed 49% of all people. ZMapp did, a monoclonal antibody. Remdesivir was the only drug to kill over 50% of all people they gave it to in the trial. Go next slide. This is table 2E. If you look at the second column from the left, it says remdesivir. Right below there, you see the percentage of people who died being given remdesivir. It's 53.1%. ZMapp, the triple monoclonal antibody right next to it on the left, 49%. If you go across here, because people ask me all the time about monoclonal antibodies, if you go to the 4th column from the right, it says MAB114. That's a single monoclonal antibody. Right below there, you see it. 35% of all people died with that a single monoclonal antibody. Go to 2 columns farther, it says REGN. That's Regeneron. Y'all heard about Regeneron? Dr. Richard Bartlett talked about Regeneron. It had a death total fatality rate of 33% of everybody they gave that drug to in the Ebola trial. When I say that the Ebola trial was the rehearsal dinner for this COVID wedding, do you know who funded this whole study? Anthony Fauci was the only funder for this study. His department, NIAID, he knew that remdesivir was the deadliest drug in that trial. He had been funding and overseeing for an entire year up till December of 2019, which is 4.5 months before he put out the mandated protocol for remdesivir. What else did I know? Next study he quoted. This is actually not the Ebola study. Gilead, who owns remdesivir, did a study on 53 COVID-19 patients from multiple countries 2 months before Anthony Fauci said it's proven safe and effective for COVID-19. Let's see what Gilead found when they did their own study for 10 days. 23% had serious adverse events, the most common. Multiple organ failure is what that is. Septic shock, acute kidney injury, and hypotension, which are all lethal. 4 of the patients, which is 8%, had to be taken off the drug early for multiple organ failure, even kidney transplants. You add the 2 totals together, that's 31% of all people given that drug had these lethal side effects within 10 days. Right now, the state of New York, we've done the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services data review for just the state of New York. For the age group 65 years and older in Medicare, all people treated at that age group with remdesivir for 5 days, 26.9% of them died. This was never the infection or virus that killed Americans. We are currently at 780,000 dead Americans, which is still the highest total for this virus that supposedly has gone around the world and mutated itself multiple times. How is it that America, the greatest healthcare system in the world, has the most deaths? Do you know who's number 2 right now in total deaths for one country? It's Brazil. Brazil has over 600,000. Guess what drug they started using in March of 2021 as their only drug treatment in hospitals? Remdesivir. You want to know what the 2 highest death total countries in the world for this entire pandemic, what they have in common? All of them died in hospitals, treated with remdesivir, known to cause acute kidney failure, liver failure. It shuts down your kidneys and floods your lungs with water and you drown to death, which requires the vent. You better have that medical directive for them. That's how they do it. All right, let's go. Keep going. Okay, great. You need to speak next time. All right, there we go. So that's what Anthony Fauci knew in May of 2020. Fast forward 5 months to September. What did France say? France was like, okay, America's got the highest death totals, 330,000 dead. Let's try this remdesivir drug they're giving out. So they gave it to 5 COVID-19 patients. 5. What'd they find? Next slide. 5. 4 out of the 5 couldn't even make it the full treatment period of 14 days. 2 of them had such extreme high liver enzyme activity and liver toxicity they had to be taken off the drug. 2 of the 5 had to have kidney transplants. 2 of the 5 died. Only 1 made it to the end and survived. You think have you seen France's numbers? They're not in the top 2. I just gave you the numbers. France doesn't have the same death totals. You want to know why? They're not using remdesivir. Next slide. So then 6 months ago, the World Health Organization, you have to get this, only got like a minute and a half and then supposedly something's gonna rattle the building. Okay, so this is the World Health Organization safety database. Associated Press, USA Today has tried to fact check me. Read the first statement in bold. Remdesivir and acute renal failure. Isn't that funny? And they want to fact check me on that statement. Okay, so let's look at what the World Health Organization knows. They actually did a review of 4 drugs being used around the world. Next slide. And they wanted to know, of all 4 drugs being used around the world, hydroxychloroquine, tocilizumab, and then lopinavir, they want to know which one has more kidney failure reported than all 4. And they had to be all like COVID-19 situations. Let's see what happened. They all have COVID, by the way. First line. Acute renal failure with remdesivir was found to be 20-fold all of the other drugs being used. It was never the virus. It was always remdesivir. Do not go to hospitals. Do not trust them. My name is Dr. Brian Artis, and there's about to be a gong that goes off, and I'm here to save you. Stay tuned.